I will enter his gates with thanksgiving in my heart. I will enter his courts with praise. I will say this is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice, for he has made me glad. He has made me glad. He has made me glad. I will rejoice, for he has made me glad. He has made me glad. He has made me glad. I will rejoice, for he has made me glad. And you've made me glad. It's good to see you again this week. And I hope that you were all satisfied with the Super Bowl last night. No. Were you all satisfied with the snacks and stuff that you had? Okay, see, that's what's important, you know, and the fellowship that you share. It was a great game. I just want to let you know that over on this table over here, there's a pad of paper and there's also some small slips. I handed some out as you were coming in. That has my contact information if ever you have a need for anything. It also has the Facebook link, so if you ever want to visit us at Kirkville, we broadcast our services. And then on the pad of paper, if you want to, you can write your name and your email address. I've been publishing since 2008 because of the students I used to teach in graduate school. And I publish a daily Bible study. And so if you'd like to receive that, you can put down your email address, and I'll include you on that, and so that you could receive those directly. They're also available on Facebook as well. So I'd like us to start out with a word of prayer, if we could. Gracious, loving God, we just thank you. No matter who won yesterday's game, we know that there are always winners and losers in life. But when we follow you, we are always winners, because you have our best interest in mind. Lord, lead us into your word that we might uncover deeper truths that might nourish our lives, that strengthen our faith and trust in you, that we might follow you more nearly and dearly this day. For we love you, and we know that you love us. And so open our eyes to see you. In the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Now, we're gonna have opportunity of going back and study another woman sometime, but this will be the last week we're going to look at one of the biblical women. Some people, like Gene, you've already gone through the biblical women, even some of the weird ones that we're doing, like the prostitute. Instead, what we're doing, we'll be switching to the book of Galatians in the New Testament. And so next week you can start reading in Galatians to pick up there. And so today we're looking at a young woman named Mariam. Okay? So before we begin that discussion on Mariam, I want to ask you a couple questions. And I also want to remind you that we do have a microphone. Some people cannot hear the questions. And so if you would raise your hand just quickly, and someone will give you a microphone, and speak into the microphone your question. They can hear me because I'm loudmouth, but they can't always hear you. Okay? So if you'd ask for the microphone, that would be helpful. Okay? And then I guess we're looking at getting a couple more microphones so it makes it easier. Okay? But here's the question I would ask you. I would like you to think about a time when you have been critical of another person. As nearly as you can understand yourself, what underlying attitude caused the criticism? Pride? Okay. Jealousy? Okay. Envy. Misunderstanding. Oh, that's a good one. Sometimes we're critical because we don't understand what someone's coming from and their background, what they've experienced. So that's very good. Thank you. Anyone else?
Ignorance.
Oh, not us.
Well, I'm not talking about us.
Oh, okay. Oh, those folks that we're critical of.
Yeah.
They're just so ignorant.
Where does that, when we're critical of somebody, where does that change from judgment?
That's a good question, and we'll be talking about that. Where does judgment and criticism connect? That's an important question. So please, if I forget it, you bring it up. Okay.
I'll probably
Nudge me with your elbow and remind me. What is this is the same question then. What is the difference between discernment and criticism? Ooh, now if you have an answer, please raise your hand. We'll get you the microphone. What's the difference between criticism and discernment? Or judgment? Okay, there's a hand right there.
Why don't you just put your chair in the middle? I think of discernment as getting information about what God may want or God may think.
Mm-hmm.
I think judgment to me is me being God and judging what other people think.
Okay. Okay, very good. Anyone else have a response to that? That's very good. There's no wrong answers.
Is there a right answer?
Well, yeah. You know, Jesus said, do not judge yet, lest ye be judged. But then he goes ahead and later on, just a chapter later, and says, judge for yourselves. Now, wait a second. Don't judge. And he says, judge for yourself. You know, we can't live in life without making judgments, right? But what Jesus really meant by that, and if I could take it into the Greek word, it wasn't judgment, it was condemnation. So we got to be careful how we condemn. Yeah, go ahead.
I got a big mouth.
Oh, no, they need to hear you.
But when you judge, are you judging, who are you to judge someone else? Unless you have discernment, and even then, you shouldn't be judging anybody. You should be trusting the Lord to use wisdom and discernment to help them instead of judging them and try to encourage them in a godly way instead of being, nah, this is wrong, don't do that. That's totally inappropriate.
So there is a judgment, a criticism that is judgment and condemns, and there's a criticism that can be helpful,
Correct.
right? It takes wisdom and discernment to understand. Yes?
I think discernment is the process, and judgment is the end result.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Good thoughts. How do you feel, or how have you felt, when you've been unjustly criticized? Hurt. Okay. Angry. Annoyed. Self-defensive.
I'd think right away, who are you to judge me? So now I'm judging them.
There you go, yes.
I think it goes back to that speck in the eye,
Mm-hmm.
and it's opposed to you got a boulder in your own.
Yes. You know, it's difficult when you want to help someone and you think you want to give someone some other idea of to consider and to help someone, to not come across as being critical or judgmental. How do we make sure that we are not being unjustly or hasty in our criticism?
Keep your mouth shut.
Think before we speak. Okay, keep your mouth shut. But no, there's a time that we're supposed to open our mouths. And silence sometimes is bad. It's condoning sometimes things that are harmful. So it takes a lot of discernment to decide when and how. But oftentimes, because we fear being overly critical or judgmental, we decide better to say nothing. All right? But then that doesn't necessarily always help. right there.
But sometimes if you ask God for help, thank you. Sometimes if you ask God for help, then it's better.
You know, this is James writes this, and I think it's very helpful. It always reminds me, be slow to speak and quick to listen. You know, and that's hard. I find that particularly hard because I like to speak a lot. You know, but it's good to be able to listen before one speaks. And then the third aspect of that is and slow to become angry. Okay, those are good things. Then you might.
It would be better to question rather than speaking out against something.
Okay.
You question and make them answer you.
Okay. So now microphone is coming your way, and you can speak in the microphone.
Maybe what you need to do is ask a question. If you question someone, then they have to come back with an answer.
Mm-hmm.
It should, suffice what you want to know.
Mm-hmm. I know in a counseling role, one of the things that we do is try to restrict giving advice to help people clarify how they feel and what they're thinking. And there's a time in which we give advice, and there's other times in which we just help someone to clarify what they're thinking about and why they responded the way we do. We all have problems in knowing when we are to respond and react. Now, here's a question for you. Why am I starting with this conversation about criticism and judgment and discernment? Why do you think? That's because that's what Mariam and Aaron did. Very good. So why don't we then go right to that passage? I'm going to take you to Numbers 12. Is someone be a timekeeper for me, because I know you have communion, and we don't want to offend that time as well. So I'll read, and if someone wants to take over where I drop off, just raise your hand, and our energetic bunny will run between you and hand you the microphone. While they were at Hazeroth, Mariam and Aaron criticized Moses because he had married a Cushite woman. They said, "Has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Hasn't he spoken through us too?" But the Lord heard them. Now Moses was very humble, more humble than any other person on earth. So immediately the Lord called to Moses, Aaron, and Mariam and said, "Go out to the tabernacle, all three of you." So the three of them went to the tabernacle. Then the Lord descended in a pillar of cloud and stood at the entrance of the tabernacle. "Aaron and Mariam," he called, and they stepped forward. And the Lord said to them, "Now listen to what I say. If there were prophets among you, I, the Lord, would reveal myself in visions. I would speak to them in dreams, but not with my servant Moses. Of all my house, he is the one I trust. I speak to him face to face, clearly and not in riddles. He sees the Lord as he is. So why were you not afraid to criticize my servant Moses?" Someone want to pick up at verse 9? Okay, wait until the microphone comes to you. Okay? Thank you. Boy, she's quick.
She does the shortcut.
The Lord was furious with them. And
Numbers.
is that the right one?
Yes.
The Lord was furious with them, and he departed. As the cloud moved from above the tabernacle, Mariam suddenly became white as snow with leprosy. When Aaron saw what had happened, he cried out to Moses, "Oh, my Lord, please don't punish us for this sin we have so foolishly committed. Don't let her be like a stillborn baby, already decayed at birth." Moses cried out to the Lord, "Heal her, O God, I beg you." And the Lord said to Moses, "If her father had spit in her face when she have been defiled for several days, banish her from the camp for 7 days, and after that she may return. So Miriam was excluded from the camp for 7 days, and the people waited until she was brought back before they traveled again. Then they left Hazeroth and camped in the wilderness of Paran.
Very good. Thank you very much. So we need to take a look at that a little bit. We find that Mariam and Aaron, brother and sister, also older sister and older brother. What do we know of Mariam?
Were the two of them jealous?
Well, what do we know before this point about Mariam?
Didn't she take the basket out of the river?
Yes,
She took the basket with Moses in it out of the river.
that's correct. So we don't know much about Moses' real mother, but they had placed Moses in a basket because every child that was 2 years, was to be killed because they were becoming too numerous. And so they saw that Moses, of course that wasn't his Hebrew name, was a special child. I don't know what that means. They recognized that he was special. Of course, to a mom, your son's going to be special, right? And so they wanted to protect him. So they devised this plot. It wasn't just by accident, well, we'll just hide him and then all of a sudden we'll snatch him so they won't take his life. But somehow there is a plan. Because all of a sudden, what? Mariam
was watching Moses and saw the princess take Moses' basket out of the water.
And went and got his own mother to nurse him.
and got his own mother to nurse him.
When Mariam saw Moses in this basket and Pharaoh's daughter picked him up, she asked, "Do you want me to get a nurse for him?" And she went and got Moses' own mother.
Yes.
She's very small.
You know, that's an interesting essence to the story. We don't realize that Miriam and her mother realized they needed to save her younger brother. And so it wasn't just putting him in a basket lined with tar or made with, sealed with tar and floating him in the water. He could get lost down the river. They knew the princess was coming to that spot. That was her usual spot. And somehow they took the risk. Somehow they knew something of the daughter of Pharaoh. And so they intentionally put that basket there in hopes that it would be seen. And maybe Mariam was a servant to the princess. And actually, as the basket was there, she pointed it out so that it could be rescued. So there is a plan in this. It's kind of interesting. So we see that Mariam was very concerned about her brother. Okay, that's an important thing to realize about Mariam. But she was also the oldest child of the family. So what else do we know about Mariam? You'll find that story is in Exodus chapter 2. There's another aspect of where Mariam is listed, and that's in Exodus chapter 15. And you don't have to go there. It's a very brief passage.
If the waters came back, after they got through the Red Sea, the waters came back. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
She led all the women in rejoicing.
Oh, say that for us again.
She after they got through the Red Sea and the waters again came down, she led a group of women in rejoicing.
Yes.
And dancing. Yeah.
And in that passage in Exodus 15, she is called a prophet. Prophetess. And so that's an interesting thing. So she had some spiritual authority on her own. She was recognized for that as a leader. Okay? Now we come back to Numbers 12. Anything else can you think of that we know about Miriam?
Peggy? Wasn't she born of a Levite? So that was like one of the religious groups of that day and age. So
Yes.
she had a natural birth line.
That's a very important recognition. The Levites didn't become noted as a separate community of Israel for special spiritual responsibility till later, but she was of that. So she stood out as a leader. That's the important thing to know. Now when we get to chapter 12 again, okay?
What was the Exodus one?
15. You'll find it in, I think it's 15:4. I could be wrong.
No, it's 2, the birth of Moses.
Well, yeah, but the where she was called a prophetess is in 15, chapter 15. Okay? So now we come back to chapter 12, and it says, Miriam and Aaron criticized Moses because he had married a Cushite woman. Okay? Now, why would that be a source of criticism by Aaron and Mariam?
Well, it was a different religion. I took it, I'm not sure. She was Ethiopian?
Yeah,
She
Cushite
would
and
have
Ethiopian, yeah.
She would have been very dark.
Yes. Oh, gee whiz. Do you remember a time in our culture that, a black man and a white woman, or a white man and a black woman was kind of taboo? It's more acceptable today.
But she was a good person.
She was a good person. Well, remember that when Moses left Egypt because he had killed an Egyptian, and even though he was a prince of Egypt, he was still known as being a Hebrew. So because he killed someone that was a naturalized citizen of Egypt, Pharaoh was enraged and was going to have him killed. And so he fled for his life and in shame. And then he went, and Jethro picked him up, and he married a woman, Zipporah.
What happened to her?
Well,
Is she still around?
oh yeah. So she might have been a Cushite or an Ethiopian. But anyways, because they were of a different culture, we know that Jethro who was also called Ruah, became a priest of Midian, so that he recognized and honored the God of the Creator. But still there's a prejudice that exists because they weren't naturalized, is Jews or Israelites. Now tell me something, there's something else I'm going to test your knowledge of the Old Testament. Who came out with Moses from Egypt?
Aaron.
Aaron, yeah. Who else? Miriam. Joshua. But who else came out? Was it just Jews?
Some of the Egyptians.
Some of the Egyptians. So when we think of the Israelites from day one, they were not necessarily pure-blooded, Hebrews or children of Abraham. Some were adopted. It's an interesting concept, huh? But there's always kind of a struggle in acceptance of people. So they criticized him because, why do you think? Just because he married this woman that was his wife, but why else?
Because the Lord spoke only to Moses, and why not to them?
Okay. Let me tell you that, no, go ahead.
He was too progressive or liberal.
Well, I don't know. I would go that far, but I think that what they were doing is that Miriam was the oldest child, and Moses was the baby. Aaron was an older brother, okay? And Miriam was looked upon as being a prophetess. That's a leader, Aaron had been the voice for Moses because he's reluctant to speak.
He had a speech impediment.
Well, he claimed to have one, a speech impediment, but maybe his impediment was here.
He didn't want to go.
I don't want to speak. I don't want to do this. When he tried to take authority before, when he was in Egypt, he did something wrong, right? He killed someone, and that marked him. Okay? So he was reluctant. Who am I to go back and release your people? That's an interesting thing because even when we mess up and screw up, I am always reminded in the scripture how God uses us and can use us. So if you look back in your life and you think, man, that time in my life or that particular decision or these particular decisions disqualifies me, not in God's eyes. Sometimes our failures actually qualifies us for leadership. I have a young man. Well, he's young to me. Everyone who's younger than me is a young man. His name is Darren. He shared a prayer. He's done this twice. Shared a prayer yesterday. He wrote because he was our liturgist. And he's a fairly new one to Christ. I got to baptize him in Oneida Lake this summer at a church picnic. And actually his soul floated on the water because the soles came off his sandals and they floated on the water. That was a funny thing. But it was a wonderful thing. But he will always talk about, just briefly who he was and the failures of his life, and then gave this beautiful prayer. You see, sometimes God uses those who are broken or previously broken to be the most powerful instruments. But yet some of us who are religious like to disqualify ourselves because of this haunting memory of some sin. And we all have those. And only by admitting our humility do we find that we are, legitimate as leaders. Now, let's look at what happens. He says, has the Lord not spoken only through Moses? Okay. The Lord spoke through Aaron, didn't he? But Moses was the mouthpiece. Spoke to Aaron, and Aaron spoke at first until Moses got his tongue, found his tongue. Right? He didn't need Aaron as much anymore. He gained confidence. Confidence is the word. But he did use Aaron. God sent Aaron out to meet Moses, right? As he was coming to be able to help deliver the people of Egypt. He used Mariam. Well, God spoke to Mariam and her mom to be able to save this boy, Moses. We don't know how they spoke to him. We just come up in the story that they made this craft and, put him out to the water. So they had been used by God, right? So now all of a sudden they find an offense because of who Moses was married to. Thinking that maybe it was disqualifying him. So why did they say, well, does God only speak through Moses? Jealous. Okay. Because what they were saying is that you should listen to our criticism because God also speaks through us.
Maybe when Moses married the Cushite woman, maybe they thought it lessened him.
Start again.
When Moses married the Cushite woman, Mariam and Aaron thought perhaps it lessened him in the sight of God and elevated them. Okay. So he should speak to those two instead of Moses all of the time.
Mm-hmm. So it may have been that what they were asking him to do was to divorce this wife. In order to continue in the leadership role, that he shouldn't have this woman as his wife. They were being critical. And part of their being critical is that, wow, God speaks to us too. what's so interesting is they were arrogant. They had been chosen by God and used by God, but they became arrogant. Now, listen to what it says here. I love this. Hasn't he spoken through us too? But the Lord heard them. Ooh. Now, when you're being unjustly criticized, realize the Lord hears.
They should have realized that God heard everything.
Yes. God heard everything. And they felt elevated in their importance. Whenever we think we're so indispensable and so important, that actually disqualifies us for leadership.
I think that happens in our churches today.
Oh, yes, it
We are
does.
full of arrogant.
Yes,
in our church.
I agree. And I think that's one of the messages there is for this. And criticism comes from arrogance. I'm more important, you know. And so what happens? There's this little footnote here, verse 3. Now Moses was very humble. Now, who is saying that? Someone wrote this down. Moses is attributed to writing, behind the authorship of the Pentateuch, or the Torah, which is the first 5 books, which Numbers is a part of. Obviously, this is a footnote that was added in because that's how people understood Moses. He was very humble, more humble than any other person on earth.
Did Moses know that the Lord was going to get those two for being critical?
I think that's humility there.
Didn't take no stuff.
No, but I think God did it. No, that's right. God did it, not Moses. Oftentimes when we're criticized, what do?
We get defensive.
What's that?
We get defensive.
We get defensive. And sometimes when we defend ourselves, we give more credence to the criticism. Oh, there's got to be something behind that. He's so defensive, or she's so defensive. There must be truth behind that. I'm not saying that there's not a time we should defend ourselves with the facts, but there's sometimes criticism doesn't have any fact behind it at all. Just feeling, just opinion, not knowledge. And so God was the one who defended him. Have you ever walked away from a time of criticism and you know that if no matter what you said, it wasn't going to be heard, it wasn't really going to be considered, you'd be wasting your breath.
Yep.
Go ahead.
In my Bible, verse 3, that statement, now Moses was a very humble, is in parentheses.
Yes, that's what mine is too.
But there's no footnote to it.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know where it came from?
Not really. What we know is that Moses is the inspiration of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books. They learned first by oral tradition. Okay, so he would tell them the stories of Abraham and these things, and then he might have written some things down because remember he was instructed by Pharaoh. Most of the Hebrews at that time, after Joseph in the 424 years or whatever, didn't have the education. But God provided by saving Moses to put him in an educational place. He had a library of all the different cultures of that time. So he was knowledgeable. And so what happened is that he didn't claim or boasted or was arrogant. And so someone else that's conveying the Pentateuch, see, it was written, shared, that others commented because of their knowledge of Moses, and they said he was the most humble compared to anyone we knew. He wasn't arrogant. He wasn't boastful. He earned respect. And that's an important thing to note. So that was probably a footnote that was later. If he was humble, he wouldn't have written that about himself. Oh, I'm the most humble person there is. Oh, Lord, it's hard to be humble when you're perfect in every way. So he wouldn't write that about himself.
My husband had a T-shirt that read, "I'm not arrogant, I'm just better than you."
Better than you. So the action we see that happens next isn't by Moses. It's by God. And what does God do?
He brought all three into the tabernacle because he had some things to say to Mariam and Aaron.
That's right.
What was the question? No, God brought all three into the tabernacle. Like, get in here, I want to talk to you. And he had something to say to Aaron and Mariam. Maybe Moses kept quiet because he knew the Lord didn't take no stuff. Did I answer the question?
Yes, you did.
And then God made Mariam having leprosy,
Okay.
which is a very bad thing.
Yeah.
Why only her?
Well, we're going to get to that. Now, I don't know about you in my house. I got four kids under 8, okay, in my house. And most days. A couple of them go home, but they're in my house most days. And I know that sometimes when there's a little ruckus, and they love each other, but they have their own little ruckuses. Now, you can go talk to this one, you can go talk to this one, you can talk to that one. Sometimes the best thing is to get them together, right? You're going to get it all together. Even if someone is innocent, how do you determine if someone is innocent? But you get them together, and you give them the same lecture. God did the same thing. I'm going to bring you together. I'm not going to deal with you individually. I'm going to get you all together. We're going to resolve this thing, right? And so he did. So Moses, his humility is shown in that he kept his mouth shut. That's like what you said, Sandy. Sometimes keep your mouth shut. Yeah, he kept his mouth shut. And God spoke. You're going to listen to me now. And so what did he say?
I can read it.
Go ahead.
If there are prophets among you in visions, I reveal myself to them.
Mm-hmm.
In dreams I speak to them. Not so with my servant Moses. Throughout my house he is worthy of trust. Face to face I speak to him. Plainly, not in riddles.
Mm.
The likeness of the Lord he beholds.
Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
Go ahead. Well, you were going to say something.
I've always read that over and over again. That was very interesting. So maybe Mariam was considered a prophetess, and he brought that up. But he speaks to Moses face to face.
Mm-hmm.
And of course he did, on Mount Sinai.
Mm-hmm.
But no one else.
What do you do that with?
Right.
Yes.
And so that was interesting to me about people that say they've talked to God, some in a vision,
Mm-hmm.
some in a dream, like Joseph. I just...
Yes, you bring up Joseph. That was my thought too, because remember at the Annunciation or Mary's pregnancy, Joseph was convinced that it was true because he had a dream. I don't know about you, I have some dreams I don't trust. But there's a discernment that takes place in what dreams are from God and which comes from our own heart and our desire. And sometimes God uses our own heart and desire too. So we can't discard that as well. But, through other people, God speaks more indirectly. Now, God can speak through our dreams. God can speak through, and I know there are people that had some vision of what can be. And they want to then work towards what can be. Okay? Those are good visions, possibilities, potentials. But directly, someone says God spoke to me. I ain't gonna, really question this. Now, here's a question, though. Now, speaking face to face, do you think that Moses actually saw his face?
No, he was too brilliant. The Lord said to Moses, watch as I go by.
Yes.
Because my brilliance will blind you.
Okay.
You know,
Say that again. Go
on
ahead.
Mount Sinai,
Yep.
there's a notch.
Yep.
And I read this where Moses stood while
We got you.
Moses couldn't look directly at God. God was too brilliant. So God told him, watch me as I go by. And he saw him from the back.
The backside.
And
That's
there's
true.
a notch in present-day Mount Sinai, said where Moses stood while the Lord was going by.
So how could it say here that he speaks to him face to face?
The other question I had on this was, so hold on, Jay, a cloud,
Yes.
and then the burning bush.
Yes.
So I'm trying to understand that.
Okay. All righty.
We really don't know what God is, you know what I mean?
It is very, that's good that we see the different, to understand what it means to speak face to face doesn't mean that, okay?
He was facing God's essence.
Yes. Okay.
When he chastised, when God chastised those three, he appeared in a cloud.
Uh-huh. So he appeared in the cloud, so you couldn't necessarily see him directly. Sometimes we look at the world and its problems, and we know there's an answer, that God has an answer, but it's cloudy. Paul even said, now we see through a darkened glass. Go ahead.
He wasn't using his cell phone.
You
I think cell phones cause more problems.
I agree.
Because you're not communicating face to face,
Yes.
especially when you're texting.
Yes.
I
Yes.
think that really divides and destroys communication.
One thing that the past couple of years have been fasting during Lent is my, as much as I can, my technology. So I might be slow if someone texts me during Lent, but I'll get back to you, but I'm not going to look at it right away. Some people just, I got to have it right there and do it. Okay. Go ahead. We have a statement here.
Oh, wait. I just have a question because in mine it says, so I speak to him face to face,
Yes.
clearly and not in riddles.
Yes.
So maybe face to face doesn't mean face to face.
That's right.
He has even seen my form. Then how dare you speak against my servant Moses?
Yes.
But maybe face to face just means that he's talking to him so everyone will understand what he says.
He spoke to him directly. That's why I take face to face.
Not in dreams and visions.
Not in dreams and vision. While God does speak through dreams and visions, God was helping them to realize that this was going to be more direct communication. So when he came down from the mount and he had the 10 Commandments, these are the words of the Lord.
His hair turned white
Yeah.
while he was up there.
I think my hair turned white too, but it wasn't because I saw the Lord. But anyways, yes.
Maybe the Lord breathed on him.
But it's important to make that distinction because some other people, if we're reading or sharing with some other people, they would have these similar type of questions. Now we go to the point, what does God do? Because you didn't realize this, and because, here's a question. Why do you think Mariam took it upon herself to feel that she could criticize her baby brother?
She should have known better.
He was a baby brother.
Because it was a baby brother. Yeah. I'm the older. I should know better. You ought to listen to me.
I'm
right?
the oldest, I understand that. I have two younger sisters.
I'm not the youngest.
And you're the...
I have two sisters. I had two sisters.
I pray for you.
I'm the oldest and I agree with you.
You see, there's some natural human elements to these stories. But then also, the question was raised, why was it that Mariam was then chosen to have this leprosy? Why wasn't Aaron inflicted at the same time?
The Lord was making an example of her.
Example of her, okay. Why choosing her as an example?
She had the biggest mouth.
Oh. So, in other words, when this criticism was being expressed, you can see them, picture this, the three of them together. Okay? Now, who would express this criticism to Moses? Was it Aaron? He was there. He was complicit, right? But probably Mariam was I protected you with Mom.
Well, sometimes us women can be a little outspoken.
No, it's coming on to the Valentine's. I'm not going to go there.
Now, inflicting her with leprosy,
Yes.
that seems a little harsh.
Well, he was harsh. If they did something wrong, he
I
stepped
know, but
on
that
it.
was,
Okay.
gee.
That's a good question. I led you right into that. So I can be arrogant and proud I did that. But why leprosy?
That was the worst thing that could happen to them in those days.
Okay. Think about through Jesus' time and what his encounter with lepers was.
He healed.
In those days, though we know now, that leprosy they thought was spread by contact. It made you ritually impure. And if you study the book of Leviticus, they'll have different conditions that make you ritually impure. So that means because she was ritually impure, she could not be in worship. She could not be in close association with other people. And in Jesus' day, they had to remain, I can't remember how far off, and they had to yell when they came into proximity with people, leper, leper, leper. Right?
Kind of embarrassing.
Yes.
Was it skin disease?
It's a skin disease. Yeah. And they just call it leprosy, but, it's some type of skin disease. And then why did she have to remain outside? She was excommunicated. Now, we don't just hear about excommunication too much. Roman Catholics know more about that than we do because she was contaminated. Now, why 7 days?
That's a holy number.
Go ahead, say that again.
It's a holy number.
That's right. 7 days meant as God's perfection. So what happens is that if you were ostracized for 7 days and the leprosy disappeared or the skin disease disappeared and you were clean for 7 days, then you could re-enter fellowship.
The oldest child in the family will let you know I'm the older.
Uh-huh.
So Mariam was sort of flexing her muscles as being the older child.
Yes.
So that was the one God chose to punish.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then Aaron asked Moses
Just put it on.
to speak on Miriam's behalf to God. Because God would speak face to face with Moses. So then God gave him the option.
How come Mariam didn't speak to Moses and say, hey, ask God to help me?
She was probably overwhelmed.
She was too arrogant.
Oh. Can we be too arrogant, even in our suffering, to say, God, heal me? Sometimes we need someone else to be praying for us and to intercede for us. And what was Aaron's role? He interceded between God and the Egyptians, or Moses and the Egyptians, because at first he was the mouthpiece. God would speak to Moses, and then Aaron would speak the words from, so he was the intermediary. Go ahead.
So Mariam was sent away for 7 days.
Yes.
But it says in my Bible that she was they waited for her until she was brought back.
Yes.
So in all likelihood, she didn't have leprosy.
Mm-hmm.
So she it was too hard to say psoriasis.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Instead of leprosy.
That's true. As a matter of fact, a footnote in my Bible says, or a skin disease. And the Hebrew word, which I didn't look up, used here can describe various skin diseases. So you're very correct. So, okay. Yep. So we need to appreciate that. The whole purpose of this is to realize that she was restored. Sometimes we need to be disciplined. I don't know if you've been disciplined. Now, I haven't been disciplined with a skin disease, but in different ways, God disciplines us.
It may have seemed like leprosy because she was white with leprosy, which means her skin was dead.
Mm-hmm.
And that, and because he said that she was like anything coming out with her skin falling off.
Okay.
So it probably was as bad as leprosy. So God, and that's what God could cure.
Have you ever been caught in the wrong? And all of a sudden you felt like a leper. You felt like you weren't deserving to be touched, to be cared for. You felt, maybe other people didn't make you feel that way, but maybe you felt that way yourself. And so sometimes when you feel that way, you feel separated from God. You live in the pain of your own failure. The criticism that you gave to others was rightly falling upon you. And it makes us stand off. I've had people who could no longer, after their sin, come back to church, because every time they did, they felt it reminded them of the sin they had done. I've talked to people who had a hard time in praying, because in the process of praying, which they needed most, they felt and experienced their wrong again. When it actually should be that we should run to prayer. We should run to worship. Think about Peter and how he betrayed. He said, I'm going to do this. And then all of a sudden he denied the Lord 3 times. And then what did it take? Jesus had to come to him and ask him, do you love me? You know I love you. But he didn't know whether he really did. He needed to have the confidence of responding, yes, I'm loved. Yes, I'm forgiven. And sometimes that's what we need to do. Even in the midst when we feel the separation is really caused by ourselves. And then the cure is also go back and find grace. It's hard for a religious person to admit that we need grace. Well, those people need grace. We can be critical. Those people need grace. It's obviously they need grace. But we neglect the fact that we need grace. As you come into Ash Wednesday, I wanted to end with Mariam for this segment because it's critical. And we need to be more critical of ourselves, but some people are more critical of themselves. And what Ash Wednesday begins in the period of Lent is a time that we reflect upon ourselves. We don't say, well, I'm going to look at you. I'm going to look at you and be critical of you. We look at ourselves and are critical of ourselves. But in being critical is not to feel alienated from God. It is so that we run into God's arms. God restored Mariam. God restores us. Let's have some prayer. Gracious, loving God, as we enter into the season of Lent, we are thankful for the stories that you give to us in your word that reminds us who we are and our place in your kingdom. Help us, save us from feeling as if we're so special we deserve special attention. Rather, just help us to feel appreciative because you have given us the attention we need. You correct us when we're wrong, and when we turn to you, you love us. You pour out your love on us. Pour out your love on us. Help us to be appreciative of all you do for us, particularly in the giving and the sending of your Son, that we might not have to live in our leprous condition, but that we might freely worship you with others and know that we are yours because you are ours. In the name of Jesus do we say this. Amen. Amen. Thank you very much.
I got 2 questions.
Oh, what's that?
Are we having 2 services on?
Yes.
Okay.
One at noon and one at 6.
Did more people express they'd like to come at noon than the 6 o'clock?
I do not know. I just put it that way. I'll be there.
Okay.
Only two
because-
show up. The only two show up. Again, if you'd like to receive daily studies, you can give me your name and your email over there, and I'll put you on our list. I have about 8,700 that receive these.
And can you put in the, I'm gonna bring flowers for Sunday in honor of
Okay,
James'
can I
birthday.
do that? Okay, can I take that?
Yeah, yeah.
All right,
yeah.
that'll help me, my remember. Okay. Okay, very good.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, right, welcome.
I've had to get a new phone number because I have taken advantage of it. My
Okay, so let Brian know, and then he'll change it in the directory.
also, I want you to have it on your
Yes.
phone.
Yeah.
If you get a
We don't remember your email.
Right.
That's fine. No, be embarrassed.
Okay.
I feel fortunate if I remember my name sometimes.